In this video, I reveal the finished product of my dream build. As I mentioned in the first video that I made announcing this project, this is where I put together all of my experience of using different components, different wheels, different frames, and I put together my ideal bike. I've never done this before, and I'm really excited about it. I've not ridden the bike yet. I'm going to show it to you, and then I'm going to just kind of talk through it, show the components up close, and really talk about why I went with these components. And here it is, the Transition Spur in this beautiful purple color.
Very purpley.
When I first heard about the Transition Spur a few years ago, and by the way, this is my third Transition Spur, but the first one that I've built from the frame up. When I first heard about it, I was like, you know, it's a little bit too much travel for a cross-country bike, not enough travel for a trail bike. Whatever, I'll try it. It's the best frame I've ever ridden as far as my riding style. And that's the beauty of a dream build, is you build the frame that fits you the best. Now, I wish I lived in an area where an enduro bike would be my ideal frame. It's not. I ride a lot of different types of terrain, from tight, twisty cross-country to flowy trails in the mountains. This bike does it all. I mean, it probably wouldn't be best on super gnarly trails, but I've taken it on fast, rough descents up in the mountains, and it's just been great. Not this particular bike, because I've not ridden this one yet. I think the Transition Spur was slightly ahead of its time, and here's why I say that. If you look at, for example, the brand new Specialized Epic, not the Epic Evo, the regular Epic, the numbers are so similar to this bike. 120 in the front, 120 in the rear as far as the travel. Even the geometry numbers are about the same. This seat tube angle is a little bit steeper. The wheelbase is slightly longer, but all the other numbers are very, very similar. And so this is where cross-country bikes are going. And I think I may have said that in one of my videos before, that cross-country bikes are going to end up at 120 millimeters of travel front and rear. Will they go more in a few years? I don't know, but this to me is ideal. And there were a few frames that I was thinking about for my ideal bike. One of them was the Niner RKT9, another phenomenal bike, one of the best cross-country bikes ever ridden. This bike is just more versatile with more travel in the rear. I probably could have gone with the Niner RKT9 and been just as happy, but I just wanted this versatile bike of 120 front and rear. Yeah, let's take a look at the bike up close. I'll show you the finished product. So it's got the silver accents right there on the Spur logo, which is why I went with the Industry 9 silver stem, Industry 9 silver headset, and the Industry 9 hubs. I've already got my Garmin wheel sensor on there. So I have not ridden these wheels. These are the Industry 9 ultralights. They do have the new Solix hub, and so I'm really excited about trying this. I'll do a review on these wheels too. I'll go really into how these wheels ride. As you probably know, if you've watched my channel a lot, I'm a huge fan of Stan's wheels, Stan's podiums, but they're not really making the podiums anymore right now, the carbon podiums. And I've wanted to try Industry 9 wheels as well, so really, really stoked to get out and ride these wheels. So I'll just kind of go over the components again. You know, since I'm on the wheels, the tires, the Maxxis Icon, I went with a 2.2 in the rear, and then a Recon Race up front, that's a 2.35. I like a 2.35 in the front just because of all the grip that you get. Moving on to the fork, I really, really like the Öhlins forks. Someone asked me in a comment if I like them more than Fox. I do, actually. I like Fox a lot, and I've ridden Fox for years and years and years, but the reason I like this fork, and also the Öhlins shocks, I don't have an Öhlins shock on here yet. I'm going to run this Fox for a while. Öhlins does have a new cross-country shock that I'll probably put on. But this is an RXF, and as I mentioned in my reveal of the project, I will eventually put on the RXC. That fork is dedicated to another project, but in a couple months, that will end up very similar ride quality. They're both going to have 120 millimeters of travel. The RXC is just going to be lighter. But the reason I like the Öhlins forks is just because they give the bike a hover bike feel. And what I mean by that is you've got a really solid platform, so the fork is just not diving all over the place. But as soon as you hit a bump, it is so plush. So again, you feel like you're kind of hovering above the terrain, and then when you hit a bump, it just opens up. So that's why I went with Öhlins. And again, I handpicked pretty much every component on this bike. No particular order. I'll talk about the seat post. So I went with a KS Lev seat post. Someone asked me why I didn't go with the Axis, and simply because I just hadn't used it yet. And this bike represents everything that I've used in the past. I have had Industry 9 wheels in the past, by the way. I just have not had them in recent history, but I know they ride really, really well. But I've used this KS seat post in the past. It's so buttery smooth. Even this one just is super smooth. You know, I'll probably put an Axis seat post on here eventually, which would be really nice because I could put on a rigid seat post as well if I wanted to really lighten up the bike, you know, like for a cross-country race or maybe an endurance race on less gnarly terrain. But that's why I went with the KS seat post. Since we're talking about the cockpit, talk about the handlebar. So this is a carbon race face. I've used this bar a lot. I actually have this particular bar on my Niner Rip 9, just a little bit more narrow. So the Rip 9 has a 780. This one's an 800. I may cut this down to 780. I'm gonna run it as an 800 for a while. And then for the saddle, my tried and true WTB Silverado. Now let's move on to the drivetrain. And this is where I've never owned electronic, but I've used it. I've used the SRAM T-Type or the SRAM Transmission Eagle before and really like it. And I just really like how super durable this derailleur is. And I was riding up the mountains with a couple of guys, and one of them broke his derailleur when I actually had the Smuggler. I was on the Smuggler that day, and that bike had this, and I was really thinking, wow, this derailleur probably would not have broken in his scenario. And so I really also like just how precise the shifting is on this bike, and you know, just the SRAM transmission, it's just so precise. So that's why I went with this. Someone also asked me why I didn't go with XX instead of XO. To be real honest, I just don't think it's worth the extra money. I think XO is light, it's just as good as far as performance, and I just went with XO because I've got to draw the line somewhere when I'm forking out all this money for the bike. And then I'll go over the weight at the end of the video, but I've got my Look pedals. I'm going to try to get some Look carbon pedals, but these are the X-Track pedals. I really like these. I can use my Shimano cleats, and they have a little bit better platform than Shimano. And I put on my carbon water bottle cage. So by the way, this bike is going to be super fast on cross country. I use it in cross country races. If I race XC again, I'm taking a break and I've really enjoyed it. But I will do endurance races, and this bike is probably the best bike I could ever imagine for an endurance race, especially if I get up and do the ORAM up in North Carolina, which I've done before. I'm really looking forward to riding this bike in an event like that. So there's the shifter. And then of course, Shimano XT brakes. As I mentioned again in the reveal video, that XT brakes are just my favorite brakes. I've used XTR. I just prefer XT. I mean, that's just the bottom line. I love the modulation. I love the instant bite that they have, especially for cross country, going fast in the corners. I want a brake that is going to allow me to brake really late into the corners and have a lot of control. And these brakes do that. ESI chunky grips, my favorite grips. They're light, they're super comfortable. You got to wear gloves with them when you sweat, but they are a really nice feeling grip. This chain ring has a really cool built-in bash guard that I may take off. It looks pretty easy to take off, but I think it's kind of cool. Probably adds just a tiny bit of weight, probably not enough to really make a difference. So I'll probably leave it on. It also probably keeps the chain on a little bit better. I got these little Jaguar frame plugs on Amazon. This bike needed to have those ports plugged up, and so I got those. I'll put a little link in the description below if you're interested in getting some of those. For brake rotors, I went with 180s, both on the front and also on the rear. I did have to get a riser block for this fork, and also I had to get a riser block for this frame because this frame uses a 160, and I actually forgot about that and built this bike up and realized I needed that, so I had to order that. And this bike, by the way, still has the rear brake cable external. Some people squawk at that, but I honestly don't care. It doesn't really affect me when I ride, and of course if I ever have to change the brake or whatever, it's just a lot easier. You know, you don't have to bleed the brake if you have to remove it. So no big deal. For those of us who work on our own bikes, it is nice to have an external brake cable from time to time. I know a lot of you out there are wondering what the weight is. So the weight actually didn't come in quite as light as I thought it was going to come in. Now, I will drop half a pound when I change the RXF fork out for the RXC in a couple months. So right now, as the bike sits, is 26.3 pounds with pedals. So these are not the lightest look pedals. There are much lighter look pedals out there that I'll probably drop some weight there. So without pedals, I don't know. I'll put on the screen what these pedals weigh if I can find it. But again, so we'll call it 25.8 because the fork is going to be changed out in a few months from now. So what's going to make the difference though is the wheels. A lightweight set of carbon wheels will make any bike ride lighter than the scale says. I have a feeling this bike is going to be incredibly fast. And one of the things that I like about the Spur, I like how stable it is. It's lower to the ground. And by the way, I didn't mention this in this video yet, but I went with 170 cranks instead of 172.5s or 175s. My first Spur had 175s and I had a lot of pedal strikes. The 170s are much better. And so the bike is going to ride just so smooth on cross-country trails because it's lower to the ground. The wheelbase is longer, so it's more stable. It just gives you a lot more confidence, and that's why this bike is so fast. And combine that with the i9 wheels, it's gonna be fast, and I cannot wait to ride it. So it's Thursday night when I'm recording this video, and 2 days from now on Saturday morning, I'm heading out for my first ride. I will take my GoPro with me, and I will talk about how this bike rides. It's going to be a good ride. So that's going to wrap up this video of revealing my dream build that I've waited years and years to do, and I finally said I'm going to do it, and I'm stoked to ride this bike. The only thing about a dream build is you're almost tempted to just hang it on the wall for a few months and look at it. But we're not going to idolize the bike. It's meant to be ridden and ridden hard, and that's what we're going to do. So that's the dream build. Transition Spur with all of my select components. Any questions or comments that you may have about this? If you've used some of these components, a Spur, let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching.